Welcome to the Cashflow to Legacy podcast, where we touch on financial topics, correct bad math, respond to interesting conversations online, and ultimately teach you how to use cash flow to fuel your legacy. Today, we're talking about something most people overlook: the business foundation of personal finances. Whether you own a business or work a regular job, your household still has cash flow, expenses, liabilities, assets, risk, and future obligations. The question is, are you managing your personal finances with intention, or are you just reacting every month? I'm Derek with Bankonomics, and I'm an expert at teaching how the flow of money works, and I'm passionate about sharing it with others. Please welcome my co-hosts, and I'll hand it over to you, Gabe.
Yeah, I'm Gabriel Church with ArkStone Financial. I'm the CEO and co-founder, and we like to take this philosophy that clarity comes first, and there is always a mission over commission. And my partner here, Noah, I'll let him introduce himself.
Well, thanks, Gabe, for the introduction on that. President and founder of ArkStone Financial. Our focus here is definitely to help families, entrepreneurship, business owners just to think differently about their wealth and legacy. But thank you. And Derek, you could kick it off, brother.
Yeah. Well, guys, episode number 2 here. We are very excited to be here back once again. So let's dig in a little bit more into personal finances. That's what we're going to touch today. We spoke about issues with the financial industry last time, but let's bring it home a bit. Most people know they should save, they should budget and plan ahead, of course. So why do you think so many people are still struggling financially?
Yeah, that's an amazing question, Derek, and you kind of framed it really, really well. I think, honestly, your personal finances should be treated like a business, whether you own a business or not, right? If you think about a business, it tracks its cash flow, it protects its liquidity, manages its risk, plans for the future, creates reserves, and has strategies to reimburse or reinvest intentionally. And honestly, I think most households, they kind of do the opposite. Money comes in, money goes out, and then whatever is left gets called that savings. So I think that's the main pain point there, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, if I can talk to this a little bit, I'll bring it back to really grade school. From the very beginning, the fact that most people have never been taught strategy. In fact, it's quite opposite. From the very beginning, we take a look at the rich and what they're doing, and nothing like that was ever given to me in school. Even looking at my kids today and talking with them, unfortunately, it is the philosophy. My parents, many people's parents growing up, they're taught, get a good job, work real hard, save as much money as you can, or the complete opposite, work Monday to Friday, bust your butt, and then spend everything that you make, fun tickets. And so people get caught in that trap.
Yeah, that's good. I would also say most people, well, what we've been taught is all wrong. And kind of alluding to what you just said, think of it this way: Americans struggle financially because they've been handed a survival map and they're told it's a treasure map. You save 3 to 6 months, that's good. You buy term, you invest the difference, you max out your 401k, you trust the market, you trust the governments won't change the rules, change tax codes. That's the script. And if you actually run the numbers, it really leaves most people with a retirement shortfall. Maybe a lapsed insurance policy and a lifetime of capital that leaked out to everyone but them. So it's funny because on one part of this, the system isn't broken. It's just working exactly the way it was designed. The system wasn't designed for regular folks. And I think that's such a huge point.
Yeah, I mean, if I hear you correctly, Derek, and now meditating, think a little bit more, there's an understanding of the system that needs to take place, and then designing your own system that can be effective for the family, right? Or people in general that struggle financially, right? So I think lack of clarity on the system itself is like probably step one that would give you like, what's in it for me, right? How does this affect me, right? Because unfortunately, people won't act if they don't feel like it affects them, right? I always kind of say this time in, time out. People are either they're ignorant, right? And that just simply means, without belittling anybody, you just don't know better, right? And everybody is not going to be an expert. Not everyone's a doctor, or a scientist or whatnot. You just don't know what you don't know. So I would say that's definitely the first key thing to kind of probe at for people that are struggling financially. And then the second thing is like, okay, what are other structures, and understanding those and which one applies again to me and my family, my future, and treating it with that kind of business foundation that is proven to work, within our, our country over here.
Yeah. Derek, it's you said a couple things and so did Noah. It's a lack of education, a lack of clarity, right? But we're taught, I love that analogy of the survival map. And then we're told it's a treasure map. And it's great because I lived off of that for years, 401ks, retirements, and me coming out of the industry that I did before I got into the financial space. That was the big thing, show up to the monthly meetings, vote for your future, work really hard. And the more that you work and the harder that you can put, the more money you put towards your future. That's it. It's an end game. And, I look at the one place that really wrecked me and made my whole ideology shift. It gave me the survival map. So I was no longer looking for treasure. I knew, like, oh, goodness, I'm not going to make it. When my mother passed away, she lived 2 years after retirement and she was washing sandwich bags, man. She had no clue. And it was the first real understanding that I think I might be in trouble. I need to reevaluate because my grandparents did well. They came from a generation where, my grandfather got to work. He owned a business. He had a produce company and he saved, and that worked for him. He's able to utilize I don't know if it's a 401. I don't know what they did back then because we weren't allowed to talk about money. But guys, that survival map showed up and I was like, I'm in the wrong region. Not only do I have the wrong map and strategy for this, I don't even want to be looking or trying to survive over here. And you really get the option sometimes with education to move yourself out of what would be the financial desert that we're kind of thrown into. And there's paradises out there. And what does that look like? Different financial opportunities, different vehicles to use, and really getting with the right advisors and reading the right material and setting yourself up. It doesn't matter. I mean, people say, is it too late? I'll ask you guys, is that why? Do they start too late?
I would argue, well, some do, or some start too late in the same system that doesn't work. Because there's also, yes, there's knowledge, which is huge, right? But then there's also the behavioral side of it, right? And they're two different animals. And the mainstream advice ignores the gap. So, for instance, people know they should save, but people also know they should floss their teeth, right? Knowing isn't the issue. The issue is the traditional playbook asks people to out-discipline their entire life for 40 years straight with no room for error, no capture system, no infrastructure. And when life happens, and it always does, the plan collapses. And we all hear, it's funny, especially with social media, because all you hear is success stories, right? You think like, wow, everyone's just doing great. Well, if you actually talk to people, especially those kind of the boomers, baby boomers in that age, a lot of them are like, whoa, these retirements, these funds, this 401k or whatever it is they've been putting money into, there's not enough there. And it's like, oh, now the government's taxing my 401k. And it's like, well, that was the whole game plan, right? You had to plan for that. But a lot of people, they switch jobs. Life happens. They want to put their kids through college. Health issues happen. All those things. And so if you're plugging into a system that's not working for you, then if anything deviates, you're in a world of hurt.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing point. And if I'm hearing you, Jens, appropriately, like you're reversing engineering to the best of your degree. You can only forecast so much, but I would definitely agree, Gabe, to a certain degree. There is a definition of like starting too late per se. And that honestly looks different for everyone, right? And in my personal experience, like it could be in my 20s. I'm like, yeah, I started way too late, and that's how I personally would 100% feel because maybe I'm being a little bit overly ambitious or whatever the case may be. So I guess to dig deeper is really towards what's your end game, right? And then am I following along the step-by-step playbook of a structure that is sound enough that would hit my goal, but then also has enough buffer, if I'm hearing you correct, Derek, with the realities of life. And that's easier said than done. And you really have to have a true holistic approach to life that has all these human elements in it, that behavior element that you're talking about, Derek, with that structure. And then what nobody's going to do better, or What nobody's going to do for you, just like you go to your gym, is do I have the discipline to lift up the weights, right? And then what do? Well, you get accountability, right? You get accountability. And I think that's where we serve and bridge that gap, guys, of, hey, we're your coaches, we're your financial advisors. This is the reality, right? You got to wake up, you got to put in the work, and this is what you could do. Here's your routine. And if you do so, hey, this is that. Now, are you trying to be a power lifter? Or are you trying to be a bodybuilder, right? So that's case for you. So in the financial world, we're working out those muscles and that mind to muscle connection that makes it a reality for you and your family.
That's so good. So here's another question. This one's near and dear to me, so I'll answer this one first, and you guys can jump in. But what does it mean to treat personal finances like a business, even if someone doesn't own a business? So let me share a little story on my end. For me, this idea didn't come from a book; it came from a farm. So I spent 9 months living at a 300-acre farm a few years ago. It was a place for veterans working through trauma. Now, maybe I'll share some of that later if it could possibly help someone. I'm happy to share those stories. But it's a story of resilience, of faith, a wife and kids who didn't give up on me, and not quitting when quitting would have been much easier. But the man running the farm was a retired 2-star general. One day we were talking through some things, and since he knew I was a businessman already, he brought up running my family like a business. And a part of that is running my finances like a business. Finances are a huge aspect of it. So at first, it sounds kind of cold. It sounds kind of distant, like business, a family is a business. Well, it's not. What he meant was simple. The things that we treat with structure, we take seriously, right? The things that we treat casually, we neglect. Businesses have budgets, metrics, reserves, they have accountability. Most families simply don't. Most personal finances don't either. And that's why there's all this drift. And let's be honest, finances is one of the biggest wedges in relationships with husbands and wives. Now, treating your finances like a business doesn't mean you need to own a business. It means giving your money the same seriousness that a business owner gives to like revenue. So there's real inputs, there's real outputs, there's results, there's consequences. It's a game plan. And a business knows what comes in and what goes out. It knows its margin. It knows whether its capital's working or leaking. Most households simply don't. And then they're blindsided when life hits them. So once you see your household as kind of an enterprise, one that you're invested in, every dollar asks a different question. It's not, can I afford this? But it's, what is this dollar doing for us? That shift, along with some other important ones, changes the trajectory of a family. So all that to say, that was a mouthful, but it's a mindset change. And at least for those wired like me, it makes sense to make these connections.
Awesome. I could talk right into it. I kind of want to see if anything, and Gabe, if you have a quick point on that, if now I'll go right into it. There's a lot to say. You said a
Yeah,
lot there. Yeah. I'm still resonating. What does it mean to treat personal finance like business?
I
That's
got something
amazing.
real quick that might spark a little bit of debate in the chat. I'll speak to the audience here. I've heard this said many times, and it does apply. What's the inverse? What about the individuals that treat their businesses like they treat a child? I think that is something we would want to bring into an understanding. I agree. I think you should treat your finances like you treat a business. If you understand your ins, if you know what the bottom dollar is in business, you can start a business in debt and behind the ball. It doesn't immediately mean that's a failed business, right? But when you understand what you need, when you can get a baseline understanding of I have to have so much, then it goes to what Derek was saying. Every dollar has a purpose at that point. And too many people get into that, treat your business like your child. You hear it a lot. And I don't know if that actually works. For those that do that, I'm great. But for me, I'll become unrational. If I look at my finances like my child, I'm unrational with my child. Hey, if I'll make certain decisions that wouldn't be wise. And removing emotion from finances, businesses don't have emotions. They have things that happen. They're pathways that people take. And so I would ask every individual out there that's watching this right now, put in the chat, ask a question, or give a statement. Where in your life are you feeling like your finances have taken an aspect of business with a good foundation? And what is something that you're hopeful or you have, it's a pipe dream that
Mhm.
this is going to be the end all, you know, this is probably going to ruffle some feathers, but Social Security is a lot of people's end game. And that scares me. Really dive deep. And with that, I'll kick it over to you, Noah.
Yeah, no, thank you that you let me resonate a little bit more hearing your points as well. And Derek, when I think about business, guys, I think about what is a successful business? What is a business that is not successful? Why are they not successful? And am I operating in a business framework that is successful for me? Right. And not necessarily selfishly because of the other people revolving in a business, right? You got people to pay, you got family to consider. There's all these little variables on that end. So when we say it's emotionless, I will argue that an institution, what makes up the institution or company? The people, right?
Mhm.
So if we are having it in those lenses of, hey, you know what? I want a functioning operating business running on all cylinders that is serving my people, with my principalities of what that is. And I'm reverse engineering what that looks like, which I've mentioned before. I think that brings total clarity on what that is, right? And it kind of gives you that motivation factor of like, hey, if you're not fueled, like how many businesses fail because of lack of motivation? That matters. You got to have that resilience, the persistency, that discipline, and all that trickles down to how do you treat your personal finances like a business, especially for somebody that doesn't own a business. Now there's
Mhm.
a gap to bridge. Okay. Well, if we're trying to bridge that gap of someone that just doesn't know what a business is and taking it down to their level is being intentional, just like you mentioned, Derek, we know that everyone can relate if you don't show up to work on time, and you're not doing what is the expectations of like your 8-hour day, then you can forget about getting paid, right? So that's simple enough, right? So the same thing, I think, in that level of like a business, you got to show up for yourself. You got to show up for your family. You got to understand, what it is to please your boss. Maybe that's your wife or your
Yeah.
your kids to a certain degree. But then also you got to make the hard decision of like, I'm not here to spoil you, right? I can't go on my impulsivity on these things because if not, I know I'm gonna go under. So that's all, Jen. So just kind of wanted to give that perspective to kind of put it in that level of like, is applicable to all for sure. Is the framing of what that can look like, feel like, and at the end of the day, do you have your consultant to make it happen, right? And is that the right consultant?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good point. And even if you're not a business person, like think about where you work, right? So if you work at Applebee's, right, and you're a waitress or a waiter, well, you got to keep track of the money that comes in, right? You got to do those businesses require you to keep track of that money. Or if you're the manager, you're cashing out the registers. Or let's say you work at a business and you go on a business trip, right? And the business is like, hey, we're gonna pay your rental car and your trip. And guess what you got to do? You got to keep receipts. So a lot of times we're around it, and most people don't think about, why are they so strict on this? Well, because businesses run things with intention. Nelson Nash talked about if you owned a grocery store, you don't steal your own peas, right? So if you have a grocery store, you're not stealing from yourself, nor are you letting your employees steal from you. Well, why is that? Because it's horrible on business. There's cost structures to everything. And so all of a sudden, oftentimes, and I'm sure we've all been there, is you get home and you run your finances, you're tired, life's difficult, relationships are hard at times, and the last thing you want to do is, you want to go spend a bunch of money on something, maybe use credit cards because you're stressed, all that stuff. And we're getting into now it's personality, it's behavior, right? We have knowledge, we know what we should do oftentimes, but we don't have the behavior behind it. And part of what we're offering you guys is over time, you're going to see that there's a framework you can plug into and you can live by that gives you, it doesn't have to be this arduous, like, oh my goodness, I have to have these big meetings about my finances and these quarterly report. Like, we're not saying that. We're not even saying put your identity in your finances. That's opposite of what we're saying. However, we're trying to help people get their mind wrapped around how this works, get their mind wrapped around the game, how the system works, how banks work, how it's okay to use banks to your advantage, but don't just use them and get stuck in a trap that everyone else does. And I think that's an important important thing that we're trying to get people to realize.
Yeah. Can I say something real quick, Derek? When
Absolutely.
so I love what you just said. I don't hate the banks, right? Some people I've heard Thomas Jefferson quoted so many times, his final breath, the last words were, "I killed the banks." Like I on quite contrary, I think that I would much rather have the bank of church. That means I love that bank. I love the bank of church, and I would treat it right. Like Nelson Nash said, Warren Buffett, he is Dairy Queen, right? And he doesn't buy ice cream from anywhere except for Dairy Queen because that's his. And so he supports it. At the same time, if I have the bank of church, going back to what I was saying, and I truly believe that education at the grade school level is where it begins. How many people today, you spoke about baby boomers, right?
Mhm.
And that was my parents. You're Gen X. I'm right on the cusp of Gen X and millennial. And then we have Noah over here. What I will say is, Derek, were you taught how to balance a checkbook?
Not no, as a no, that's
Yeah.
often not taught at all.
Either was I, but I did. And the first time I ever balanced a checkbook, it was my grandmother that sat me down. The baby boomers, they knew and understood at the same level. Do you think a bank doesn't balance its checkbook? Like, go ahead and owe the bank 3 cents and argue with them. Guess what? They win. So if we want to look at it like at the business level, this base rudimentary foundational step of balancing a checkbook, you got to know what it is. And I would argue, and let me know in the comments. Again, I'm going to reach out to the audience. How many of you would know right now to the cent what's in your bank account and what did you spend today? I don't. I have come to lean on technology, but is that really what we should be doing? Or should we at least know how to balance our checkbook at least once in life? Did you balance your checkbook? And I
Yeah,
would say start there.
yeah.
Yeah, and just to add to that point, and I think bring it hopefully full circle with the premise of the question here. When we think about a business, we think about the again, what is the ideal, what is not, right? And obviously, Gabe, the banks. Let's just put it right now. Ideally, they're pretty sound structure. Hey, I know you owe me 3 cents, right? So pay me back. So if that is the norm, let's just say of like what it should look like with the banks, then I would say, wow, how can they do it with hundreds of people and all this other things? Well, they delegate to elevate, right? So in that end, to your point, Gabe, and to the audience for sure, having the understanding of the need, but then are you being able to leverage into a system that you could just take a step back, be able to look at it and be like, oh, yep, I know that this is my ledger is good, right? You just need to be able to know my ledger is good. I don't owe anything to it or whatever that case may be, or whatever your goal is, because everyone's different is good. And we could simplify that maybe in three main little areas, at least in my personal opinion of, is my governing authority, whatever that may be, am I in check on that? Is myself, is that, who I'm trying to influence, or got an array of people and friends and partners or whatever I have to take care of? And then am I actually achieving that? And so on and so forth, right? Am I able to clearly identify what that is primarily what we're getting to now, to keep it simple. But yeah.
All great points. So as we kind of bring this almost to landing, not quite there, I have a question for you guys. So first, why do people lose momentum? And what are some foundational steps or foundational things that you'd encourage people to take? What pops up?
Well, for me, like momentum is when you think about somebody gaining momentum or pushing a stalled car. It's kind of difficult at first, right? Or trying to get into
Mhm.
the rhythm of that. So it's like, what can it be the path of least resistance, right? Unfortunately, that's just human dynamics. I would say leveraging technology, right? Kind of what Gabe said, right? There's a plethora of tools that are out there that are meant to make our lives easier, that can gain that momentum, right? Like, when people think about a budget, it's like, man, I don't even know where to start. Like, should I start with my laundry budget? Should I start with, what's this healthy ratio? And in my opinion, you have to at least get that non-negotiable, what's that looks like for you. But then now it's like the maintenance, right? Because that's momentum, right? The maintenance and the revolving effort of it is like, okay, do it once really well. Whether you get help from outside or you do it yourself, you know, it got to come somewhere, right? Because to be frank, nobody's going to run your business for you if it's your business, right? So get that done well once. And now do you have the delegation of tools that's going to help you continue that momentum time in, time out, persistently, flawlessly, right? Because baby boomers, I would say, what, Gabe, did they do that on a daily basis or a monthly basis when your grandmother was showing you those ledgers? It was
I'm pretty sure it was purchase to purchase, man, from what
it was
I
manual action,
remember.
right?
Yeah, it was manual action, purchase to purchase. She had a checkbook and taught me how to work it right out of a checkbook.
So there you go. Now we're blessed enough that we don't have to do that. So, but at least you got to do it once, right? So, I think that's the starting point, Derek, of like gaining momentum. Know what you want, have it done right, and then use the tools to make it consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Derek, I'll speak to this momentum, right? And in business, we're coming out of that. The biggest step in my life was walking out of the trades. You know, I got a lot of years in the trades and coming out of the trades, letting go of a pension, you know, watching a 401k tank. And I'll talk about that in another episode. I can get in depth to that, but starting a business and being amazingly excited, like nothing's going to stop me. I'm the juggernaut. I'll blow through walls. You can't stop me. And then realizing very quick that nothing ever is just this straight angle up to the top. There's mountains and valleys. And I think where people lose momentum is they get this full steam ahead, like a train on a track. It's hard to stop it. But when the work is required, people aren't willing to put in the work. And work isn't easy when you're uneducated. So I would say that lack of clarity comes down to the main issue. Like Noah said, go get an advisor. There are people out there that are willing to help you if you need that. And if you don't and you want to do it alone, making sure that you're doing the right things, you're taking the right steps, you're building a proper foundation so that your train doesn't derail, you know, that train being whatever vehicle you want to use. And then just when it starts to get hard because we coasted down to this valley, which felt fun, you know, but now it's hard work to get over the next hill. Now your motivation is gone and it becomes discipline. And so if you're not disciplined in the things that you're doing, don't expect to come over the next berm easily. You know, discipline makes things easier. And I'll break discipline down as one thing, doing the things you hate as if you love them. You know, nobody wants to get up at 4 a.m. and go run. Noah said it. There's 3 points. You know, what is your greater value, the first principle, and what's above you? What is really working within you? And then is there things that are to the side and behind you that you need to take care of? You know, and if you get all that in alignment and that's something that comes out of motivation and moves into discipline, I think a lot of that question that you're asking would disappear for a mass, you know, big majority of the individuals that are on this journey.
Yeah, all great. Yeah. And if I was to add my 2 cents, so I used to speak to groups of entrepreneurs, and one thing I would tell them was when your wounds, so a wound can be trauma, it could be distractions, it could be current stuff, it could be relationships. There's a whole host of things that could be because it's personalized to you. But when your wounds overcome the level of your motivation, that's when you'll quit. Right? Motivation's kind of like adrenaline. It's short, it's a burst, but it's short term. Motivation's temporary, it's a spike. Discipline is good as long as it's charting down the right path. So, foundationally, in the money game, these are some of my suggestions. You need to get a game plan. I already mentioned that before, but one that includes strategically maybe paying down debts the right way, the really expensive stuff, the credit cards, the bad stuff, yet also capturing the flow of money into your side of the ledger. This is huge. This is one of my core things about flowing money and capturing, creating reservoirs to capture the flow of what you're already doing. You need to be building liquidity, reserves. You need to think about liability protection. You need to be able to hedge inflation. You want to have good tax savings. You want to educate yourself on how money works, how the game works. You want to buy some of your net worth now while you can. You want to evaluate your life value, both today and down the road. I mentioned positioning earlier. You got to think ahead. So, for instance, think ahead in 2030, think to 2040, think to 2050. Think about your family. Maybe you don't have a family. Well, are you looking for a family? Are you trying to get married? Maybe you want some kids. Think 20, 30 years down the road. Think about all these things. And that's why all this stuff are items that we're going to discuss and break down. So first and foremost, have a curious mind and then buckle up for the journey is kind of what I would recommend.
Well said.
So before we get off here, any practical last minute steps people could take today, in your opinion?
Well, for me, at least for me, I don't know about quick, but it is simple. It's kind of a lot of things, right? You just got to pick up the weight, start lifting kind of thing. But then now what you all presented it can still feel overwhelming. So how can I do it? I mean, there's a saying, you take an elephant and if you're going to take out the elephant, you got to take it piece by piece, right? One bite at a time. So understanding the reality of motivation, understanding the reality of the peaks and valleys, the ups and downs. What is the human element that stops us? In my opinion, is our pulse, right? And just like every business, we got that 10-year goal, we got that 5-year goal, we got that 3-year goal, and we're trying to have multiple people who are on the same direction, or yourself, if you're on the top bracket of like running it. What do they all do in common? Well, for me, in a practical sense, is having a healthy, rigid pulse, right? And to simplify that, weekly, once a week. A once a week reminder of like, what was my New Year's resolution? What is my personal finance resolution? And kind of what you said, as you go through the journey, you're going to kind of find out, did I even want really what I said I wanted, 3 months ago? And that's perfectly fine. But what is not perfectly fine is you come to that realization, you don't have the discipline to change it. So if you have that natural weekly pulse, right? And where, again, 10 years sounds super far, 20, 30, forget it, right? It's like, okay, well, let me focus just on the year and let me break that year even more. Like the human element is like, how long does it take to build a habit? People say 21 days. Okay. So if I was able to just stick it with whatever I felt of like my year and I broke that year into 3 months of like, let's just say I have this credit card that I want to pay down, forget about everything else per se. You plan it well. Let's just say your New Year's resolution, everybody's so excited. Yeah, do that, plan it well for that year. But then now it's like, okay, how do I break that up to just something so digestible for me? Okay, that's that one credit card. That's the one that's kicking me. So I'm going to do it in 3 months. Cool. And then you just remind yourself every week, consistently on Monday at 6 p.m., I'm going to talk to myself, to my significant other. Are we on track hitting that? And if the answer is yes, amazing. Whether you outsource or not. And if the answer is no, that's where the motivation is going to kind of dip down. Okay, what am I going to do to fix it? And just continue that. And then boom, after 21 days, you already kind of got that rhythm going. And then now you just uphill in the sense of the discipline, right? And then the momentum is going to go up and down, but at least you're still pushing along. So that's for me. That's what's worked for me, my family, and who I advise, obviously in that counseling consultant. Like, hey, you told me to hold you accountable. Are you hitting it? And that pulse is what I think alleviates the human dynamics of things.
Yeah, Derek, I agree with that. So I don't need to speak anymore to it. But there's one thing that I would say, I like to focus on middle class America. That's where I would throw myself into that bucket. But just one thing, one foundational piece, go to Google, go wherever you can find one. They're online. Get yourself a financial budget sheet, an income and an expense. Do the budget one time. Just fill it out. Where we're talking about business. And the big kicker for me is I can do what Noah's saying, and I can have that budget and my income and expense yearly by building the habit. Or once a year, I'm going to have to do a whole lot of work one time every year for taxes. And that's where I get it. But bottom line, if you don't have that done, that's where I would say start there. Get a good, clear understanding of your ins and outs of your finances.
Love it. Yeah, I love it. So I'll add mine, then we'll close this down. But I would say, number one, challenge your mindset. That's come up a few times. I remember one of my first mentors in real estate said, you'll never own the real estate under your feet until you own the 6 inches of real estate between your ears. And that was so important to me because sometimes some of the things we do is a challenging endeavor, right? It looks cool online. But yeah, we're going to make a bunch of money, whatever it is. We're going to change our lives. And then you start doing it and it's like, whoa, this is tough. So challenge your mindset. How about this one? Follow us. This is shameless plug, right? It's a real one. So we're going to be dropping resources. We're going to be cutting through these issues slowly and just follow us along for the journey. Comment below. we engage with those who comment to us. Just come along for the ride. Know your inflow versus outflow. Gabe just talked about this. Noah did as well. Just right now, your actual numbers. If you don't know the score, you're not playing the game. So find out how much you bring in, how much you pay out. Maybe go for the past 3 months. Just get an idea of where you are. Be honest with yourself. Project where you'll be in, say, 2030. Run your trajectory a few years. Think if everything stays the same, this is where I'll be in a few years, right? And then be honest with yourself. Are things going to remain the same? Hopefully they are. Hopefully they get better. Sometimes what I call the what if ninjas, right? What if something happens and it comes in and you have a health scare, or maybe you're a dual income family, the spouses both work. Well, what if one of the spouses gets laid off? The economy changes, right? Are you strapped month to month to the point where if you lost an income, it would destroy you? Those are things to think through. Run what I call a protection audit, right? Take snapshots. So you take today's snapshot, maybe go out 10 years, so about 2036 or so, and then take a snapshot into retirement. Same as the previous point I just made. See where you're at, if your family would be okay if something were, God forbid, to happen to you. And those are just some things. I think we all raised some great points. So let's do this. We're going to close this one down. Be sure to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to like our videos and stay tuned for our next episode. God bless.
Take care.